I had made a decision that my life was about to start over. And I get in there and I'm in this interview and it's going well. He's in a suit and a tie. And I interrupt the interview. I just need to interrupt this interview because I want to be honest with you about who I am. He was like, "Okay." I just got out of a maximum security federal prison. I was a drug dealer and a drug addict, and I'm not that person anymore. And I said nothing else. His mouth is closed, and it's like, he don't know what to say. I definitely don't know what to say. I just got out of a
Mhm.
maximum security federal prison. And so he
Right.
finally breaks the silence and he said, "Holy shit, I wasn't expecting that." And so we laugh, and he was like, "Let me talk to the owner of the company at this time." And they hired me.
What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassity. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners. This is where you come for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Folks, don't forget to follow, subscribe, share this thing out, like it up. It really helps the show. I really appreciate it. So who are we talking to today? Well, Jennifer Rogers, and I've got to give a shout out to Jeremy Harrell because he connected us, and Jeremy's one of my favorite people. And Jennifer, wow, does she have a story? She has quite the story. I was talking to her the other day, and I mean, she went from this popular cheerleader, homecoming queen, to being the popular drug dealer in town, and it's just like it takes you on a ride. She could also probably teach us a lot about sales, um, which we'll get into in her story. But she um, she is now the founder of National Women's Prison Reform Coalition. She's the visionary behind Rise Up Media. She's the host of the powerful new podcast called Fenced In. And she also does a lot of sales training. She's a keynote speaker, and she's the author of the book, The You Within. I cannot wait to jump into all this with her. Before we do, I want to recognize our show sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots, looking for a car. Then you spend 4 or 5 hours at the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a root canal appointment. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to Auto Plaza Direct to get started with your personal car concierge. The new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Folks, I want to share with you a powerful and moving new book you won't want to miss. My Name is Saffron. Voices, silenced, stifled, and taken away by author Saffron Gustafson. This isn't just a story. It's a journey through resilience, survival, and reclaiming your voice after being silenced for far too long. Saffron's story takes you inside the hidden struggles, the pain, and ultimately the triumph of refusing to be defined by circumstances. As Saffron was putting the finishing touches on her book, the prison she had just been released from, Federal Dublin FCI, was permanently closed because of sexual abuse of the women prisoners. If you've ever wondered what it takes to rise from the darkness of places, to find your truth, and to speak it boldly, this book will inspire you. Pick up your copy of My Name is Saffron today, available now on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Trust me, you'll be moved, challenged, and changed by her story. Jennifer, welcome in. How are you?
Thank you. I'm amazing. How are you?
I'm doing great. We were just talking about how cold we are. Uh, I think it's like 5 degrees today with the wind chill, and you're in like Georgia, which I always just assume that's south, so it's supposed to be warm. But you're just saying it's cold.
No, it's cold. It's cold here too. Not 5 degrees, but it's cold.
Nobody likes 5 degrees, I don't think.
No, I couldn't imagine.
So Jennifer, you've been busy doing all your stuff, and I've checked out some of your new podcasts, and they're excellent. You got great guests, you're a great interviewer. But let's go into this incredible story that we talked about on the phone, because it's one where I was sitting in my car, and we're talking, just going, wow, and then that happened, and then wow. Take us back.
Mhm.
how did all this get started? What was it like growing up in that town when you were just appeared to be like everybody else?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very small town called Summerville, Georgia. Not a lot going on there. I mean, there was no mall, no movie theater. We had maybe like 1 or 2 restaurants. They didn't get a super Walmart till, 10, 15 years ago, I think. I mean, it's very small town. Everyone knows your business and you're either in church or you're in sports or both. I mean, that's pretty much what there was to do in a town like that. So I grew up very sheltered, two-parent household. We went to church every Sunday, went to my grandmother's house after church and had lunch every Sunday. And our lives were good. We didn't have a lot of experience with much. And so we lived in this house on a lot of land. We were always outside. My dad would go deer hunting, and that was kind of our day to day life. I played softball, basketball, soccer. I did cheer. There wasn't much we weren't involved in. We were on the children's choirs at the churches and multiple children's choirs. We did beauty pageants. So, we were heavily involved in just
I'd
about
say
anything and
so.
everything that you could be involved in. And I was the second born out of 4 of us, and
Okay.
my older sister, she was the rule follower, she was quiet, she was neat, she was everything I think that most first children are. She was
Mhm.
easy, and I came in second born just on fire. Can't tell me anything. I've got this larger than life, personality and vision. I never met a stranger, and because of that, I think it was pretty difficult on my mom to, like, really know how to parent me because I represented something that she was never allowed to be in her own strict environment upbringing. So it kind of created this dynamic where I was always getting in trouble and that planted a seed in me at a very young age of, am I just not good enough? Or am I worthy, like, as the person that I am? Because who I am and how I show up, it's not acceptable. And so that seed started to take root. And over a period of years and years and years, it began to grow and grow and grow. Well, fast forward to my early teenage years, my parents ended up getting divorced. And
Mhm.
when that happened, it really wrecked all of our lives, and it wrecked mine, I think, the most because my older sister, she was 17 years old. She was kind of on her way out of the house in another year. My younger
Mhm.
siblings were too young to really understand what was going on, and, they didn't get the parents that me and my older sister got because we got them the longest together. And
Mhm.
so when they divorced, it created this void within me, and I
Did
became
did you see it coming, Jennifer? Like sometimes when parents get divorced, the kids are kind of off on another island and they don't know that this is going to happen. And then other times there's just a lot of just unsettled household and you know that maybe something's going down. Did you kind of have an idea or not?
no, no. We would see our parents fight on occasion, but I mean, parents fight. That's a normal
Sure.
thing, I think, in a relationship. But outside of that, absolutely not. I remember a girlfriend of mine when I was young, her parents had got divorced. And I said to her, we were talking about it. She had spent the night, and I was like, I could never imagine going through that. And she was like, yeah, I could never see your parents getting divorced. Y'all have like the perfect family. And so, it was years of, I think, unhappiness in their own marriage that we did not see. And so when it did come down the pipeline, it was shocking. And, and to us, it felt like it kind of happened out of nowhere because we didn't have a front row seat to what they had going on within their marriage.
So how did, because I mean, you were, from what everything that I've read, Jennifer, your high school, you were in that world where you were popular and things were happening. Was that kind of your escape or were you just overachieving because that's just what you did? What was going on with you when all this was going on?
So I had actually the high school in the town that I grew up in, I moved from that high school when I was 16 years old. I had
Okay.
actually got into some trouble summer of my going into junior year. There was this big fight that broke out between me and a couple of girls. And when that happened, my mom made me quit cheerleading. And that was what had been holding me together because I was doing competition cheer in high school and it was my outlet. When I
Hmm.
lost my outlet, that's when I really started to spiral. And I had already, the spiral had already began years ago, but that was kind of the pivoting point of it. And so I moved schools. And when I changed schools, I changed from Chattooga High School, which is the town I grew up in, and I moved to Armurchie High School. So I moved to this school. I'm the new girl and, didn't really know anyone. And at first, I felt very unhappy there because I had grown up with everybody at the other school. And so
Hmm.
I ended up going back to Chattooga for a couple of days. And then I was like, this isn't the same. I'm not cheering anymore. I'm not in the same crowd of people. So I ended up going back to Armurchie. When I got back there, they were having the Miss Armurchie pageant, and I entered and I won that pageant at the school. It was a huge stink because, the girls that had grown up going to Armurchie, they had this
Right.
dream, of being Miss Armurchie High School. And then here I come in and I
The
win this
new
pageant.
girl.
Yep, the new girl. And so, the people that I was close with, they were happy for me, but the other people that I was not close with, they were not. And so I hung out with the guys at that high school. At that point, I had already been partying. We were partying at Chattooga High School on the weekends. There was this one house where we would all hang out with the parents and the parents would drink with us and we would smoke weed and so the foundation had already kind of been set for that. And so when I got to Armurchie, I, linked in with the crew of guys, that were the country boys. And here we are, we're doing the same thing. We're on the weekends, we're hanging out, we're drinking. And it was innocent outside of the fact that we were drinking at that age and smoking weed on occasion. But outside of that, we weren't like doing drugs or, like real drugs or anything like that. And so that was kind of my life that I was living. And eventually, as time started to grow on, this void, this hole that I was living with on the inside, it was just there and it was like permeating, just waiting to suck me into it, basically. And, I had become very good at being two different people at all times. And it was the person that I presented myself. And that representative, she had it all together. And the person that was on the inside, I was very broken and I was very hurt and I was angry. And no one really knew. They didn't recognize the signs of that. And I think, yes, I was an overachiever because there was that part of me that felt like I was unworthy of love and acceptance to be who I really felt like I was. And so I had to present this person that had it all together and in order to be accepted and, to be loved. And so that within itself kind of created this environment within me that was setting the stage for everything that was going to come after that.
So what happens next?
So I am working at a store in the mall. It's called Claire's and I'm, just working there part-time. I'm still at the All-Star Cheer Gym and I'm cheering there and I also work there. So I've got two jobs and I'm in my senior year of high school. So I leave early after second period and I've got these two jobs. Life is good. And this store manager, her name is Tracy, and my best friend Amber, she had just moved to Armurchie too. So we became friends because we moved there at the same time. And she had been experimenting with drugs. And I remember the first time that she told me that she had been high on meth. I was so mad at her. Like I could not believe that she had done that. And then here I am a couple of months later. I'm working at this store in the mall, and my manager, she is the craziest person to this day I think I've ever met. Like, we had this inside joke, we would call her the Who from Whoville because her bangs were, like, up to here, and she would, like, stack these scrunchies on top of her head, and her hair would, like, be cascading everywhere. I just never met anyone like her, and there were these 3 women that would come into the store consistently, and I noticed they would, like, kinda go around and be pointing things out. Well, one night when we were closing down the store, she confided in me that she was stealing this store merchandise and trading it for methamphetamines with these women. And so she begins to talk to me about how it makes you feel and what it does. And, I should have known better, but I was also curious. So she brings this guy down from Atlanta. He comes in the store one day, and it's who she's getting drugs from out of Atlanta. And he's this young, buff, attractive, white man. And I'm like, well, if he's doing it, it can't be that bad if he looks like that. And so I eventually decided that I was going to try it. So Amber and we do the whole we're spending the night at each other's houses, and we end up going to Tracy's house that night, and the guy from Atlanta comes over, and we do meth for the first time. And I remember, she gets it out and she shows me, she's got this tin foil and she's like, you put it on here and you light the lighter, and she's showing me how to use it. And so here I am at 17 years old, doing meth in this woman's
Were you
house
scared?
for the first
What
time. No,
was it?
I've never
No.
really been scared of much of anything, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
fear was never something that I've really ever dealt with.
Uh-huh. So what
Yes.
happens?
So we do the meth, excuse me, we do the meth. And it, like, makes my stomach hurt. So Amber and I are, like, in the bathroom for it's what it would have seemed like hours, and we're in there, and she's sitting on the floor, and we're just talking, 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 because that's what it does to you, it speeds you up. And so after that, we come out of the bathroom, and then we watch this independent made film called Requiem of a Dream. Have you ever heard of it?
I've heard of, I haven't seen it.
It is the craziest movie to this day that I've probably ever seen, and they're, like, doing drugs in the movie, and so we're so high, at one point, it feels like we're in the movie, with them. And when we finally left, we stay up all night long. We get up the next morning and we go our separate ways. Well, I had driven over to this guy's house that I had been dating, and his mom, he had graduated, he was older than I was, he still lived at home, but his mom never left us there alone. Well, she was leaving to go to church, and he tried to force himself on me, and I had to, like, fight him off of me. So when I got out of that scenario, it scared me a little bit, and so I left there and I went to my dad's house, and I just walked in, went into my room and shut the door, and I just laid there, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh," like, I didn't really love it the first time that I did it.
Mhm.
And a little bit of time went on. I began to talk with one of our other friends, and she had been doing it also. And I found it out in that conversation. Well, she was raised in an environment where the adults around her were using. So we ended up going and getting high with these adults that she would get high with. And from that moment on, I was hooked. It was like, exhilarating, honestly, because it would give you this feeling that you could just do anything, that you could conquer anything, and you weren't sleeping, so you were getting more things done. And, initially in the beginning, it was fun. And, I'm still living this double life, and Amber and I have these fake IDs, and we're going out to, like, bars and stuff at night. And I mean, my parents, they just have no idea what's going on. And so the snowball is starting to get a little bit bigger and bigger at a slow roll, because I had not had, any type of trouble. The signs really weren't showing themselves, and I started to lose a significant amount of weight. And so that's kind of where people were like, what's going on with you? And would lie and say, well, I've been taking yellow jackets out of the gas station. So we had went out one night to this dance club, and I met a guy there that was actually from Somerville. I knew who he was when I saw him. He didn't recognize me, because the last time he had seen me, I was this, little chubby girl. Now I'm like this woman.
Mhm.
And at this point, I'm 18 years old, and we go, he gets me, tells like, suggests that I should come work at Up the Creek, which is this restaurant in Rome. And so I get a job there. I'm waitressing, things are going great. and I'm getting high on meth frequently at this point, and I'm not going to school when I'm supposed to go. I'm laying out because I'm hanging out with all these drug addicts, and still, my parents didn't know. Back then, they didn't do the whole "we're calling home to alert your parents
Right.
that you've missed school." And so
Yeah.
I'm living this life that no one knows about, and that's kind of what it was. And I had gotten so good at hiding it that there would be mornings where my pupils would be so enlarged, dilated, that you could barely see the color in my eyes. And so I would put these brown contacts in so you couldn't tell by looking at me that I was high. And one night, the guy that I was dating, we actually went and stayed at our manager's house, and I didn't have any drugs, and I would stay up for like weeks at a time.
Wow.
And I had fallen asleep there, and first time that I had probably been asleep in at least a week. And so we had to get up early that next morning for him to go wash his clothes for work. And when the alarm went off, I remember our manager, he looked at me and he was like, man, she can stay here and like just get up when she gets up. She seems kind of out of it. And he was like, no, she's fine. She's fine. So I get in my car, and he doesn't know that I'm using. So I get in my car and I leave, and I'm going literally 5 minutes up the road to where one of the houses that we hang out and we go do dope. I knew they'd be up. I knew there'd be drugs there. And I turn right onto the road to get to his house, and the next thing I remember is my head hits the ceiling of my car, and I had fallen asleep, and my car goes over the curb and hits this privacy fence head on. And I mean, it
Wow.
just takes the fence up out of the ground. And it jarred me awake, it caved in my windshield. I couldn't get out of the car. I couldn't find my phone. I'm laying on the horn because I can see these people. They've clearly heard what's going on, and they've got their lamp on. They probably called 911. And eventually the police get there, and they ask me, "Where are you going so early in the morning?" And I could not remember. I did not know where I was going. And so I'm like, "Where am I going? Where am I going?" And I said the first thing that came to my mind, like, where would I be going this early in the morning? I was like, "I'm going to get ready for school." And so he starts to write it, and he pauses and he looks at me and he was like, "You're going to school on a Sunday?" And when he said that, it triggered it. And I remembered, no, I'm going to this place. I'm going to wash my clothes for work. And I was like, no, 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 no. I'm actually going to my friend's house. I have to work a double today. I'm going to wash my clothes. So they get me out of the car. I'm in the back of the ambulance. The ambulance is checking me out. They're like, you probably need to go, be checked out in the hospital. You may have a concussion. I was like, no, I just want to go home. Well, at this point, I had found my phone before I got out of the car, and so they put me in the back of the police car while they're searching it. And I had called Amber. So Amber was actually dating a Rome City police officer at the time. They lived together, and she had friends, and she was listening to it on the scanner, and she was like, "You're about to get arrested." And I was like, "For what?" And she said, "They found meth in your car." So I get arrested. I am 45 days out from my senior graduation, and I have been arrested for possession of methamphetamines.
Mm.
So I get there and I get a
In
bond
a
the
small
next
town.
morning in a small town. I get a bond. I call Brent, my best friend, who's a drug dealer. I cannot get him on the phone to come get me out. I'm calling Amber. She can't get him on the phone. So I'm like, damn it, I'm going to have to call my parents. So I didn't call my dad. I called my mom, and I was like, hey, what are you doing? And she was like, I'm just sitting here. What are you doing? And I was like, well, can you come and get me? And she was like, well, where are you? And I was like, well, what had happened was I fell asleep driving, wrecked my car. They found meth in the car. It was not mine. Can you come and get me? So she was like dead silent for a second. She was like, I'll think about it. Hangs up the phone. Couple hours later, her and my dad show up together. This united front, something that I had not seen in years because they
Mhm.
didn't have a great parenting situation.
Mhm.
And so here they are on the other side of this glass, and they're like, you have a problem, you're a drug addict, and we're not getting you out unless you agree to go to Winwood. Well,
Okay,
Winwood
let
is
me
the
ask you something at that time, Jennifer, did they have any idea that this was going on with you or
in that moment, I think that they realized in that moment when they heard that when they heard that I had been arrested, it all I think made sense to them. Because at then there had been a meeting at the school at this point that I was not going to graduate because I had missed too many days and I had to start coming back to school. So there were signs that they had. I
Mhm,
had lost all this weight, but I don't
mhm.
think there was ever even an
They hadn't put it
ounce
all
of
together
thought.
yet? Yeah,
And they would have never put that together because that just wasn't something it just wasn't a thing, it's a big
yeah.
thing now, people are like, "Oh, that's normal," but back then,
Mhm,
absolutely not. I mean, we're talking about Rome, Georgia in 2003.
mhm.
So, no, they did not, but in that moment, they did. So they're like, "We're not getting you out unless you agree to go to Winwood." Well, Winwood is like this place, this psychiatric hospital. It wasn't even a drug rehab. And so
Oh, no.
I am screamed at them at the top of their lungs. I was like, "I do not have a drug problem." And so that, of course, only further proved that I had a drug problem, how I was
Right.
acting. And so they left me there. And they take me back to the back, and I'm in medical. They dress me out. And the nurse is like, "Honey, I do not know if you have a drug problem or not, but you are a very young and beautiful young woman. And at least if you go to Winwood, you will be a person. Here, you are nothing but a number, and someone back there is going to try to make you their bitch." And I just started crying because what does that even
Yeah.
mean? Even though I had been around doing drugs, my level of exposure to things was still very limited. So I
Right.
get to the back and I'm like, "I cannot stay here." And so I'm like, "I know if I can get my dad on the phone, he'll come get me out." But I needed him by himself. So I called
Mhm.
my dad and I was like, "Daddy, like, please, drug test me. And if I fail the drug test, I'll go to Winwood, but just please come get me out." So he and my mom end up showing up a couple hours later, and my mom signs the bond and they get me out. Well, I had a plan. I went to my mom's house, and the plan was I was going to go to school the next day. Brent was going to bring me something to flush my system. I was going to pass the drug test, and I was just going to go back to business as usual. Well,
Okay.
by this point, it was all over the radio, front page of the newspaper. Miss Armurchie High School arrested for felony possession of methamphetamine, says she's going to school on a Sunday. It was chaos. So I end up
Mm.
not going to school. My mom and I get into this big knockdown drag out argument. She takes my phone and they take me to the emergency room to do a drug test. So I knew that I was 18 years old. I knew that I could say, "Y'all aren't coming back here," because I knew my HIPAA rights. And so they're getting ready to take us all back. And I said, "I don't want them in the room." So they couldn't allow them to come back. So I'm back there. I know I'm about to fail this drug test. There's a phone on the wall outside of my room because you remember my mom had my cell phone. So
Mhm.
I called Amber, I called Brent. I'm like, "Listen, I'm going to fail this drug test. I'm not going to Winwood, and I need y'all to come get me out of jail because they're going to come off my bond." So it's taking forever for that test to come back. And of course, it comes back that I failed it positive for methamphetamines.
Well, I've got a question though, Jennifer. Like, why Winwood? Why do you not go to? Why is a rehab not an option? It's like a psychiatric ward. That just sounds like that's way far off the bubble of where you should go. Was
I
that the
think
only thing
that,
around?
yes, it was. It was,
Okay.
and then you gotta understand they had no knowledge of anything like this, no experience. They're just looking at what's local, what has a bed, and where can we put her? Because 'cause they're scared to death. They don't know they think that I have lost my mind, like,
Okay. Well, so then I think
literally.
that Winwood's the right place then.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I fail the drug test. I go out front. My mom, my dad, my older sister, my mom's sister, they're all there, and I walk out, and I was like, "Well, I passed it." They were like, "We wanna see the results." And so I said, "Okay." I failed it with traces of methamphetamines. Like, what does that even mean? I just thought that if I could downplay the situation using my words, that it would make it
Uh-huh.
better. It did not. And
It
they
did
were
not.
like, no, it did not. And I was like, I do not have a drug problem. I'm not a drug addict and I'm not going to Winwood. And my dad, they're all just crying. And I'm being defiant because I'm mad. And my dad puts his hand around my arm and his whole hand fit around my arm. That's how thin I was. And he was like, "Look at you. Look at what you're doing to yourself." And I had always had a weight complex, and the drugs
Mhm.
made me skinny. And that was another reason why I was addicted to them. And I was like, I look good like this. And
Mhm.
so, you know, I'm not going to Winwood. So we get out to the car and my dad is like, "Should we put her in the middle of the back seat so that she doesn't jump out of the car?" And I'm like, "Jump out of the car? Like, I'm not crazy. I'm not gonna jump out of a moving car." So
Right.
we get back to the jail. My mom, buzzes in. I'm coming off of her bond. And my stepmom was there and she whispers in my ear and she was like, "I know you can do this. Just go to Winwood." So I had decided in that moment, because it felt like someone was for me in that moment. When
Mhm.
everybody in this group is like against me, it felt I had someone on my side. So I said, "Okay, I'll go to Winwood." And my mom was like, "Call me when you're serious." And so they took me in, the jailer came out and took me in, and I called Brent, and he sends somebody up there to bond me out. So, my parents had that jail on such lockdown because my mom worked in the court system that they knew when I bonded out, who it was that bonded me out. They called them like, "We are her parents. She has a drug problem. Why did you get her out?" And they told her, they said, "You know what? She may have a drug problem, but Floyd County Jail is not the place to fix it."
Mhm. Mhm.
So I went to their house that night. I snorted a line. It did nothing for me. And I went to sleep and I got up the next morning and I went home to my dad's house. Well, the high school that I was enrolled in at Armurchie, they wouldn't let me come back because I was an out of area student and I've been charged with this felony drug charge. And it was too late in the year for me to go anywhere else without having to do an entire another year to graduate. So I ended up having to drop out of school. I went and got my GED. And not long after that, the guy that I was dating, he and I ended up getting pregnant. And he signs up to go into the military. So I'm clean in this moment, but at the baseline of it, I'm still an addict. So
Mhm.
here I am, I'm
Do you
pregnant.
think that though, Jennifer? Are you at that
No,
time in all this realm of things, are you thinking I'm an addict, that I really have a problem, or
no,
are you thinking everybody around you is crazy?
I think everybody else is the problem.
Okay.
Yep. And so now I'm pregnant. My whole life is falling apart. Now I've got this baby on the way, and he signs up to go into the military. And so off he goes, which leaves me here, by myself. And so now I go back and I'm hanging around my drug addict friends and I'm just so depressed because it's my life. I had this trajectory, I had this path, and just like that, it's gone.
Mhm.
So I go back to work and I'm working in the restaurant and I'm pregnant and, I end up having Madison. And when I had her and I held her for the first time, it was the love that I felt. It was like what I had searched for my whole life, to be loved and feel that feeling. And I vowed
Mhm.
in that moment that I would never back and get high again. But the reality is that I was an addict, and it didn't take long, maybe 2 months, that I was going back and getting high again, and not all the time, not consistently, but occasionally.
Mhm.
So, I end up having to go to court for that drug charge, and they dropped it to possession of drug-related objects. I pled out to a misdemeanor, charge, first offender. Well, they
Okay.
give me 12 months of unsupervised probation and a fine. And at this point, I'm living in Columbus, Georgia, working in this cheer gym, but I'm driving back and forth from Columbus to Rome, getting high, like, occasionally on the weekends. So, Madison's dad and I ended up getting married. he's stationed down there for the moment, and I go to court, and I get a call that I have to go report for probation. So I go in, and I was on unsupervised, but I had to report one time. So I go in that one time, and I report, and I pay the fine, and she drug tests me, and I fail it for methamphetamines.
Mm,
Now, at this point, no one even had a clue because I looked like I look now. You know,
mhm,
I wasn't doing it all the time. I knew how to manage it. So I fail it for meth. And now she tells me, she was like, the judge may revoke you.
mhm,
And so I had to wait about a week. And she called me and said, the judge is revoking your probation for 60
mm,
days. You're going to get a 2-for-1, but you got to serve 30 days in county jail. So now I have to go tell my family that I failed this drug test. I have to tell my new husband that I failed this drug test. So I come up with the story. I went to a party, I messed up, I got high, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. And so, my mom kept Madison while I was in jail. They ended up letting me break it up into 2-week segments. So I did it for 2 weeks. I came home, and then I think for a weekend, and then I went back. So my husband, he gets his stationing orders, and we are actually getting sent to the state of Washington to out there because he's a ranger. So he goes out there while I'm in jail. I end up getting out, and they were allowing me to move to the state of Washington, but I still had to call in and report. I still had to take drug tests and send them in. And so I move out there, and I stay out there for about 9 months. My life is good. I'm running this all-star cheer gym. I'm clean. Things are going well, but our marriage is miserably, miserably failing. And in the failure of that marriage, I ended up coming home for Easter, and I went and got high again for the first time in almost a year. And when I did that, I felt like I was missing out on the world. And it wasn't long after that that I ended up moving me and my daughter back to Georgia, which restarted just the catalyst of everything that would come for the next couple years.
mm. So you move back. Do you guys get a divorce?
We were separated. We did not get
Okay.
divorced initially. So our marriage together lasted about a year. And
Okay.
we stayed married legally, and we divorced officially at the 3-year mark,
Okay.
um, due to me getting arrested again.
Wow, that's a lot. What just you just shared, Jennifer, that's just a lot that happened. So you get back with Madison, and now you feel like that you're back on your home turf. How
Yeah.
does this evolve?
So I get back, and hanging out, looking for a job, and didn't initially go straight back to drugs. I was getting high, but not all the time. And I
Mhm,
ended up meeting this police officer. And I met him because I got caught with a fake ID. I was 20, about to turn 21. I got caught with a fake ID, and they called the police, and it was him and another officer. They didn't arrest me. They gave me a warning, confiscated the fake ID, and he actually gave me his phone number.
Oh,
So he
wow.
and I So he and I started talking to each other, and then we started dating. And so here I am once again. I'm living this double life. I get a job working for a telemarketing company in Adairsville, Georgia, and I am just killing it. I'm very good at it. Well, all of the women in there, not all of them, but some of them had drug problems.
Okay.
And so eventually, my drug usage starts to increase a little more over a period of time, and so here I am, it's me and it's Madison, and I'm getting high when she's asleep in the bed at night, and I'm getting up, and I'm dropping her off at school, and I'm going to work, and I'm seeing him, and I'm doing all these things, but behind this veil, I'm an
Mhm,
addict once
mhm.
again, but I don't believe still that I'm an addict. So I end up losing my job at that telemarketing company, and when that happened, it was right at Christmas time, and, all I'm using more frequently at this point
Okay,
because
let
now
me
I'm
ask
back.
you something, Jennifer, because I know that you're really good at sales and you're really good at telling more. How did you lose your job there?
I called in an order that so our calls were recorded, and
Yeah.
on Fridays or on, like, holidays, if you hit your, like, quota for the day, you would go home. Well, I was, like, the only person in the office, so I had one person, he's a friend of mine, and every time I called, he would pick up and buy it was degreaser. He would pick up and buy the degreaser. So
Okay.
I call him, he don't answer, and I write the order up and turn it in.
Gotcha. All right.
And so the manager pulls the call, she sees that he never answered and then that I wrote up the order, and that was
Yeah.
basically
That
what
was the
did
end
it.
of that.
And
Okay.
that was the end of it. And she was like, "You know, I hate to do this to you. You're a great salesperson, but I can't, I can't keep you." So now here I am. I've got rent, I've got a child, I've got to do Christmas and all the things. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I went and got a job in a nightclub in Atlanta. Never had even stepped foot in one a day in my life.
Okay, because I've followed all this because it's one of the highlight parts of your VH1 My True Crime
Yes.
Story. Um, how in the world? Because I know that you're an addict. You're talking about
Yeah.
that, but you've never been around this situation at all. How
No.
does someone think? Was it just thinking that okay, I need money, I'm an attractive person, this has got to work?
And I know I can dance. Yes.
Okay,
Because
okay,
when we were partying in the basement in high school, that's what we were down there, not stripping, but we were, dirty dancing just with our
uh huh,
clothes on.
right,
So I'm like,
right,
okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to go to the strip club. I walk in the door, I was like, "I need a job." They hire me on the spot. Now, mind you, I've never even been in a topless bar at this point in my
yeah,
life, and so I
right,
have to go and, like, buy the outfit, buy the shoes, and I start the next day. So, I get a babysitter for Madison, and I go in, and I start my first day on the day shift, and the manager, he buys a table dance for me. Well, I don't even know what that means. Like, that's
hmm,
how naive I am. Like, am I supposed to dance on top of the table? Like, what is it that I don't know what to do? And then I'm embarrassed. Like, I cannot. So I asked one of the girls, what is it? She was like, it's a lap dance. I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot give this man a lap dance and like look him in his face. Like, I just cannot do that. So I was like, I need a minute. I need a minute. So the bartender gave me a Valium. And once she gave me that Valium, it was over with. I danced all around that strip club for the rest of the day and walked out of there, and I had made $700 in one shift.
hmm.
And that was it. That was it.
So how long were you there to the point where the real nightmare lands on you?
I was there on and off for a year and a half. So I didn't
Okay.
go consistently because the thing about that life is, you make such a high amount of money that you
Mhm.
don't have to go every day unless you just
Does
have very
anybody know that
expensive
you're
habits.
doing that?
Very few circle of friends know, but that's
Okay.
it.
Okay.
So I'm driving back and forth from Rome. I moved Madison and I into this luxury high end apartment in Rome, Georgia. And now I'm starting to use drugs more frequently. I'm starting to be around a different group of addicts more frequently. And, I've got the babysitter keeping Madison. I'm driving back and forth to Atlanta and I'm living this life. Well, I ended up telling the police officer, he and I were on and off, but we were more so off at this point. But I ended up telling him that I was working in the strip club.
Okay.
So one night or one day, I should say, I am going to work and he calls my mom and he tells my mom that I am allowing drug addicts to watch Madison and that I am stripping in the strip club. So I had gotten off work and I had all these missed calls from my mom. And so I call her and she was like, "Where are you?" And I was like, "I'm on my way home." And she was like, "What is going on with you? Lee called me and he said that you had all these drug addicts keeping Madison and that you are stripping in the strip club." Now, mind you, in my family, this is like if it went from black sheep to like you're in
Mhm.
hell at this point, you know? And
Mhm.
so I was
Right.
like, yes, I am stripping in the strip club, as a matter of fact. And I was like, y'all haven't been a part of my life. You don't help me pay my bills. You're not going to tell me how to live my life. And you're not involved with anything. And no, I do not have drug addicts keeping Madison. So we get off the phone, and the next day, her dad or her and my dad do a surprise pop up on me at my apartment. And they come in with an at home drug test and try to like force me to take the drug test. So I go into the bathroom and I pour orange Listerine in it and I hand it back to them. And so my mom's like, "This is mouthwash," because she takes the lid off of it and smells it. And this huge fight ensues. And I mean, I'm screaming at them. And I've never cussed at my parents, but in this moment, I did. I was like, "Get the F out of my house. You cannot tell me what to do." They were trying to take Madison. I wouldn't let them take her. It was just chaos. So they
Okay.
leave, and that was so right after that, I get somebody alerts the management office and tells them that there's drug activity going on in my apartment, and they evict me. So they evicted me, and when that happened, um, my ex mother in law gets DFACS involved. It's just this mess of a situation. So from there, I found somewhere else to live, and I start because DFACS is involved. I'm having to do these random drugs tests, so I get clean momentarily during this time. I'm passing the drug test, and I end up just taking Madison back because at that point, I'm like, "You don't have a court order. You don't have legal custody." So I went and I took Madison and I was like, "If you wanna fight me for custody, you can fight me for custody, but this is my daughter and she is coming back with me." So it was in that time period that I realized for the first time that I was an addict because
Mm.
at about week 2 of me being off of drugs, I just felt like I had the best way I can describe it is I felt like I had just demons coming out of me. It was like the worst feeling, the worst physically, mentally, spiritually. I was just in a really dark place. And so that was the first time that I realized that I was an addict.
Mm.
And during the midst of all of that, I went to the club and I worked on my 21st birthday, and I worked the day shift, and my girlfriend was supposed to come and meet me and pick me up, and we were going out for our birthdays. She didn't show. Well, I had drank too much to go home and to drive home. And so I had to call a friend of mine, and was coming to pick me up. So I went on to the night shift to work while I was waiting on him to get there. And this guy ended up putting date rape in my drink on my
Mm.
21st birthday. And I was violently sick, throwing up in the bathroom all night. My friend never made it because he could never find where I was at. So I ended up driving myself home at about 5:30 that morning, and that was my last time that I worked in the club. So I end up going to the same friend who I had also had a relationship with off and on, and he was dealing drugs. And I went to him and asked him, "I need you to front me a quarter ounce." And he didn't want to do it because he was like, "I don't want you in this. I don't want you in this lifestyle." And I was like, "Listen, I trust you. I'm going to get it from somebody else if I don't get it from you." So he finally agreed, and he fronted me the quarter ounce, and I broke it down and I sold it. And the next day I came back to him and I paid for that and I bought a half ounce and I still had money left over. And it was in that moment that I realized how much money and how easy it was to do that. And that is the moment that I became a drug dealer.
Okay, so that's I was trying to remember how all that chapter by chapter here. So you left the nightclub and you get fronted and then you pay that off or no, you sell it and then all of a sudden this hits you like and by the way, part of your story is you're really good at sales. So
Yes.
somehow the light goes on. Oh my gosh, I'm
Yes.
using this stuff. I could sell this stuff. So what happens next?
So I
And oh, I
start
wanted to
selling.
ask you, Jennifer, by the way, the police officer that you are dating and he makes the phone call to your mom, what happens with that relationship?
Oh, it was over after that.
Okay,
Don't
so
call
that was
me. Don't
that.
Yeah,
That was
don't
that.
call
Okay.
me, don't text me. Yep, you're done for.
Okay. So
So,
now let's
at
right
that
into the new, uh, the queen pen is born.
So I start realizing, and here's the thing, everybody that I hung out with did drugs. They would always call me and ask me, did I have anything? And so I was like, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. And so now from a half ounce, it starts at 1 ounce and then 2 ounces and then 8 ounces. And it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And so now I'm just like a full time drug dealer, and I got more money now than I've ever had before. And so I'm just blowing money, because when you get money fast, you blow it fast. And I'm living this high life, and I'm buying Madison thousands of dollars worth of stuff at Walmart, whatever she wants. And I'm just living this drugged out drug dealer lifestyle. And eventually, the person that I got it from, he ends up he violates his probation. So when he violated his probation, all of his clientele starts coming to me. And that's when I became like the real like dope man, dope dealer, because now I'm going from just selling, an ounce or two here and there, to I'm getting 8 ounces, and I'm selling half a pound of meth. I'm making runs to Atlanta with someone else. We're picking up a pound or two, we're bringing it back. And so now I'm like running these drug runs. And it got to the point where I wasn't really breaking it down anymore. I was splitting it up into two large quantities. I'm dropping it to two guys. They're selling it. They're giving me the money. And I'm just doing that over and over and over again. But I'm also still using.
Mhm.
So he ends up getting out of jail. We get back together, and he wants to do the right thing. He doesn't want to be on drugs anymore. He doesn't want to sell. He wants us to get our life together. And in the midst of that, actually, before he got out, while he was still locked up, I was paranoid. I knew they were watching me and everybody around me, because they knew what we had going on. And I end up going and I drop 8 ounces of meth off at one of the houses that I would always drop dope off at. And I told him, I said, this is it. I'm not doing this anymore. You need to make this last. I'm going to pick Madison up. We're going to Florida. I just need to get out of here for a little while. So I leave there, and I know my license are suspended. So I pass a Rome City police officer. Well, remember, the person that I dated, he was part of Rome City Police Department. And so they
Mhm.
all knew who I was. He had it out for me. And this police officer pulls out behind me, and I'm like, shit, I knew I didn't have anything, but I also knew my license were suspended. So I pull
Mhm.
into this parking lot where this hair salon is that a friend of mine's mother owns. The police officer goes down the road. I cut the car off, I cut the lights off, and I just sit there for a minute. He ends up coming back and pulling in behind me and hitting his lights. He comes up
Mm.
to the window. He says, license and registration, please. Well, I knew that I hadn't broken any law. He hadn't ran my tag. He didn't know. Like, I knew my rights enough to know that what he was doing was illegal. And so I was like, why? And so we did that song and dance for a second. And finally, he was like, your license are suspended. Step out of the car. I am arresting you for driving on a suspended license. So I'm sitting in the back of his cop car. He's searching my car. He's just sure he's gonna find meth in my car, but I don't have anything. So he's
Mhm.
searching, 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 searching. And earlier that day, I had actually a girlfriend of mine had called me, because there had been this big federal indictment in Rome, and for money laundering. And she was like, "Hey, girl, like I've got all these sex toys from the sex shop are over here where they ran in on it." She was like, they're brand new, like body paint, body powder, like come get it. You can sell it. You can give it away. Just do whatever you want. But I've got so much of it I need it gone. So I go over there. She had like grocery bags filled up of this stuff. So it's all in my trunk while this cop is searching my car.
Oh
They're
my
like
gosh.
taking stuff apart, convinced that they're gonna like find drugs. He picks that bag, one of those bags up, and the bottom falls out of it, and
Oh my
dildos
gosh.
just go all over the ground.
Mhm.
He's scrambling, his face is red, he's trying to pick everything up, and I'm in the back of the cop car like, "Yeah, MFer, that's what you get." I'm talking all the crap because I know I don't have drugs on me. So finally, we get to the jail. I know I'm about to cash mine out because I have the cash in my pocket for a driving on suspended license charge. And they said, "What are you booking her for?" And he says, possession of meth, possession with intent to distribute, pills not in original container, theft by service of singular ghost phone, concealed tag, altered tag, no proof of insurance, and driving on a suspended license. And I was like, "What?" And he said, "And make sure you check her prior because I don't want her to bat her pretty little blue eyes and get out of this one."
Wow.
So now here I am with all these charges. And I had made a phone call and I called, someone that was going to sign my bond to get me out when I had a bond. So I'm in first appearance the next morning and they give me the bond. Well, while I'm in first appearance, they call me out of the courtroom and back to the sheriff's office. And my mom is sitting there and she was like, "I want to know where Madison is." I was like, "I'm not telling you where she is. Like, it's none of your business. She's safe. I'm about to get out." She was like, "These are serious charges. You are not going to get a bond." I said, "I already have a bond and it's about to be signed and I'm getting out and I'm going to get her." So they wouldn't let me leave until I told her where Madison was. So I finally told her where Madison was, and I go back. My bond gets signed, and they hold me in jail for 3 days on a signed bond until they can get me into juvenile court for my mom to take temporary custody of my daughter away.
Mm.
So I get into the courtroom. My mom is sitting there with all my ex husband's family that's local. And the judge is like, "You can't take care of your daughter while you're in jail." And I was like, "Well, the funny thing about that is I have a signed bond. And I know that I have been held on this signed bond for 3 days for this court hearing to happen so that my mother can take temporary custody of my daughter away." So he grants her temporary custody. I go back to the jail and they release me immediately when I get back. So I get
Wow.
out. Yeah. I get out and I'm going to see Madison at my mom's house, which was a very strained relationship at this point between my mother and I. And I'm still living this life, and DFAX is involved, and I'm having to do all these random drug tests, and I'm passing the drug test, but it's because I'm faking them. And I would be there with Madison at night, and I was all she knew. And one night she lay there in her little hands on my face and she said, "Mommy, I just wanna go home with you." And I just I couldn't take her. I couldn't fix it, and even if I tried to fix it, it wasn't gonna be an immediate fix because of this hearing that had happened, and I would go there and I would get so high that I did not feel the weight or the emotion of that time in both of our lives.
Mm. So, what is the event that brings you down?
You just don't get high.
Well, I understand that, but you end up getting into this situation to where you get these charges. But if I remember right, your your charges ended up being federal, right?
Not these charges.
Okay, so
So,
these charges were state, but it evolves
these
into
were
this
state.
federal.
It does. So, with this scenario, with this situation, my ex-husband flies in, he files for emergency custody, and they, deny it because he hadn't had enough day-to-day involvement in her life. And he filed for divorce, and the judge that sat on my divorce case also was sitting on my state case. So he wanted to see what was going to happen in my state case before he ruled in the custody in our divorce. Well, I lawyered up for obviously for both, and my lawyer gets the entire case thrown out because it was an illegal stop, illegal search, illegal seizure,
So
regardless of the evidence.
everything got wiped. Okay.
Everything gets
Well,
wiped.
you
So
had to feel pretty
it's
good
now
about
looking.
that.
Yes. So now it's looking like I'm going to get custody of my daughter back. Well, the same day that they throw that case out, I'm in the car riding in the back seat with someone in Cedartown. We go through a roadblock. His license are suspended. They search the car. He has marijuana and scales. They charge us basically the same thing: meth, possession of meth with intent to distribute, marijuana. He doesn't claim the drugs. I had $3,500 cash on me. They asked me where the money was from, and I said the strip club. Now, in my hearing with the judge, my preliminary hearing on our divorce, he said, I will not give you custody of your daughter if you are dancing in a strip club. You have to have a moral, upstanding job." So when that arrest happened and we go back to court, they pull the transcript of that arrest. It says I got the money from the strip club. And he was like, I told you that if you continue to strip, I would not give you custody of your daughter back. So I lost full custody of Madison at that point. And when that happened, I lost my mind. I sold more drugs and I got more high, and I did everything that I could to take my own life besides putting a gun to my head and pulling the trigger. And eventually, I ended up getting federally indicted by the feds, and they wanted my co-defendant. At the end of the day, they wanted him, and I wouldn't turn him in. I wouldn't tell on him, and so they ended up indicting both of us, and, I in the midst of all of that, I had to serve 10 days in county jail for driving on a suspended license. Well, when that happened, my dad had came and visited me, and he was like, "Listen, you just need to go into the military. Just go into the military, get away from here, like, get a fresh start in life." And so he took me when I got out to the military office. They agreed to allow me to join the military, but I had to get my city probation officer to release me from supervised city probation so that I could go to boot camp. So I go in that day to ask them to release me so that I could join the military, and it's taking longer than what I feel like it should take. And the
Mhm.
DEA walks in, and I had been indicted.
Mm. So then what happens, Jennifer? Because I mean, you thought you were on the way out to go to the military so you could escape all this, and now you're indicted federally, which is a lot different. What
Yes.
happens?
So I go to jail and I have a court hearing on that Monday. This was a Friday. I go into the court hearing. They give me a bond and it's an OR bond. But the condition of my bond is that I have to go home to a safe environment. Well, I didn't have that outside of my family, and my family had been watching me self-destruct for years. They for
Mhm.
sure were not going to let me come home. And they're scared to death because now I have a federal indictment. They think I'm with the mafia or the mob. They don't know the cartel. They're thinking the worst of the worst. And so
Yeah.
they leave me in there. So for 10 days, the first 10 days I'm in there, really, I was just sleeping because I'm coming off of years of,
Mhm.
just trauma and abuse and addiction. And after about that 10th or 11th day, I came out of the cell, and there were these volunteers that would come in with the church. And I had been so angry at God at that point. I grew up in church, but I did not
Mhm.
want to hear anything about God. My dad used to say, I'm praying for you. And I was like, don't pray for
Mhm.
me. You can save that for somebody else, because the God I grew up believing in abandoned me at 13 years old. Like, don't pray for me.
Mhm.
So this woman, she walks into the cell, and you couldn't tell by looking at me, and she didn't know why I was in there, and she walked straight up to me and she said, "Can I pray for you?" Well, at this point, I have nothing left to lose except my life, and you can take that because I've been asking you to take my life for months, crying out to this God that I don't even believe in to take my life. And she puts her hand on me and she prays for me and she speaks in tongues. And when she gets done, she looks me directly in my eyes and she said, "You will never go back to your addiction again." And
Mm.
in that moment, I knew that I'd never go back, and I never did. It was like I
Wow.
could breathe again for the first time. And so over the course of the next 4.5 months, I ended up getting transferred to a federal holding facility in Fort Payne, Alabama, and I totally turned my life around. I got intentional about apologizing to the people that I had wronged, writing letters, getting to know myself, getting to know my pain, getting to know my grief, and getting back close to God again. And I got baptized in the jail in Fort Payne, Alabama. And my dad was coming and visiting me every week. He never missed a visitation. So he was seeing the change in me.
Mhm.
And my mom ended up coming and visiting me. And she said that her and her husband were going to get me out, but that I had to agree to go to rehab. And
Mhm.
so they got me out, and I just asked her, I said, "Please do not make me go to rehab. I am not an addict anymore. Give me an opportunity because there is a high probability that I'm going to go to prison. Let me take this time to spend with y'all. If I fail a drug test, if I show any signs, I'll go to rehab."
Mhm.
So they
Mhm.
agreed. I stayed out on pretrial, totally turned my life around, had a job, I was clean, and I had moved forward. And I was allowed no communication with my daughter during this time. They wouldn't let me talk to her. And so I filed a motion with the court to let me, because I had rights to her. And
Mhm.
so the court had a hearing scheduled and they were ordering them to bring her back to the state of Georgia for me to have visitation with her. And the same day that that hearing was scheduled, my federal sentencing date was scheduled on that same day. So the judge wanted to wait and see what happened. And I knew that there was a probability that I would go to prison. There was a chance that I wouldn't, but there was a high probability that I would. So we go into the courtroom. My mom's crying. She stands up and speaks on my behalf. Please don't make her go to prison. I'm a court reporter. I see what this does to people. The person
Mhm.
standing in front of you today is not the same person that she was a year ago. And the
Mhm.
judge just very matter of factly said, she may not be the same person she was a year ago, but maybe she'll learn to have a little more respect for the law. The U.S. Attorney's Office is asking for 30 months in federal prison. I'm going to round the 4 months that she did in county up to 6, and I'm going to give her 24 months in a federal prison camp. I felt nothing when I heard that
Mhm.
sentence. I was so numb, Brent, at that point in my life that I just didn't have an emotion. I was so
No, and you
detached.
had been through so much. I mean, up to that point, I'm surprised you were alive.
When I got the indictment, at that point, I was homeless. I was living, off of someone's couch. I had all my stuff in the back of my car. I had no desire to live. None.
Mhm.
Like, I was hopeless. And even though I didn't believe in God anymore, I still cried out to God to take my life, and God took my life, just not in the way that I wanted.
Yeah, I took it
I
in a
didn't.
different way. Yeah.
Right. I didn't believe that I was good enough for my daughter. I didn't believe that I was good for anybody because of
Yeah.
all of the wreckage that I had created, and I lost the one thing that was holding me together, and that was her. And so when he gave me that sentence, we walk out of the courtroom and my dad is sobbing, crying, and my mom is sobbing, crying, and it's nothing. It'll be okay. It's gonna
Mhm.
be okay. So I finally get my self surrender letter, and they have actually sentenced me to. And let me back up, because in the midst of that, I had one prayer. And my one prayer to God was, no matter what happens, I just want to see my daughter. Please let me see my daughter. And so I get my federal sentencing letter, and they had sentenced me to SeaTac Federal Detention Center in, like between Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. It was a maximum security facility. It was not a minimum security camp, which is where I was supposed to go, but that is where my daughter lived. She lived out there. And when the judge in Rome found out that that is where I was sentenced to, he ordered them to give me 4 days of supervised visitation with my mother before I self-surrendered to prison. And so the one prayer that I asked for was answered. And maybe
Mhm.
not in the way that I wasn't specific. I just said I wanna see her. And so we
Mhm.
flew out to Washington, and I saw her for the first time in a year and a half at that point. And, then I took her back, to her dad and her stepmom, and I went to federal SeaTac detention center and rang the buzzer and turned myself in and walked into that prison and didn't see daylight till the day I left.
Wow. So let's take a break there because I want to talk about what happens to you going into this unknown place that you're going federal prison, and then how you made all this stuff happen when you got out. It's pretty incredible. Many people don't like how they show up online. Individuals think there's no hope when it comes to managing your reputation on Google. There is hope. It's called the Discoverability Company, and they can help you whether you're building a reputation from scratch, repairing your search results after a negative news story. Discoverability can also help you how you're portrayed on popular AI services like ChatGPT. To learn more, visit discoverability.co, not .com, .co. Listeners of Nightmare Success can take $100 off with coupon code Nightmare Success. And the Nightmare Success podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group, the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white collar criminal justice system. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you this is a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you've made it through to the other side, this is great space for you. You can join us on Zoom Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Okay, Jennifer. So you've all this journey that you just talked about has led you to here. You I know what it feels like to go up and hit that button and get and walk yourself through. What's going through your mind? What are you thinking?
I didn't really have a thought. It wasn't until I walk into the pod and the door slams behind me that the weight of the situation hit me. And knowing and understanding that I'm in a place that doesn't have an outside yard, it's all controlled movement. It's like a county jail on steroids where you have to go to work and you return to your pod and you return to your cell and the door shuts behind you and it locks and you count 3 times a day. So there's no freedom. And when I went in there and I got into my cell, I just cried because I could not fathom that this was gonna be my life for 2 years. Like, how am I going to survive this?
Mhm.
How? There's not even air. In our rec room that was in the pod, they had vents at the top that air would come in, but that was the extent of it. You couldn't even see the sunshine, you know? So, how am I expected to get through this? What am I going to do? And so the first couple of weeks, I was depressed and I just
Was
cried
there
and
a
I called
reason?
home.
Was there a reason, Jennifer, why you ended up because you people get put in different places all the time, but I would be thinking that with 24 months, unless it had to do with your record before that, why you would end up in a maximum security detention center. Uh,
Well,
how does one end up there?
it wasn't my record because I had never been convicted of anything except the
Right,
misdemeanor, and I pled first
right,
offender on that. So it wasn't on my record. So I was the lowest level on the guidelines that you could be.
right,
And the case that was in Cedartown, it got thrown out when I was in prison. So
right.
I had never had like a true conviction of a felony because they dropped the
Ho-
other one to a misdemeanor. So what the thing that I heard was on the inside is that they were sending anyone that had 3 years or less to the detention centers because the camps were overcrowded.
Okay,
I don't know if that was the case, but
could
that's
be.
what I heard. Could be. So here I am, I'm in this prison, and after the first couple of weeks, I started to get into a little bit of a routine. They assigned me a job in the kitchen, and so I'm going to work and, I'm reading, I'm writing letters, I'm journaling, I'm calling home. I'm going to church, on Sundays, and so you just kinda get into that routine where it's like, this is just my life, this is what I'm doing, and you just kinda go with the flow. And that's what it was for me for a really long time. I read this book while I was in there, and it's called the Captivity series. It's by Katie Souza. It's a very she's very well known now all over the world. Back then, she was not, and that book really started to speak to me, so I began to write a book in prison, and I went to therapy. So every
Mhm.
week I went to therapy with, a licensed therapist, and that was the best thing that I could have ever done for myself because it allowed me to work through the childhood traumas that I was dealing with, the pain that I had, the void that I had, the unworthiness that I had, and also, the disappointment and shame that I had
Mhm.
regarding what I had caused in Madison's life. So that
Mhm.
was the one positive thing that I can say about that time in my life. Now, I also got locked in solitary confinement for 3 weeks under investigation for something that I did not do. I go down to my job in veg prep and they show up and handcuff me, put me in solitary confinement in a cell where the lights stay on all day long, feed you through a
Mhm.
hole in the door. There's no shower. You get out Monday, Wednesday, Friday for a cold shower, and then you go back in there. I thought that I would lose my mind in there that first week that I was in there. And then about after that 7th day, I just conquered myself emotionally and mentally, and I was like, "All the things that you've been through in your life, you can survive this. This is
Mm.
nothing compared to the things that you've overcome. And so it was in that moment, once I realized that I could conquer myself fully in this scenario, that there was nothing that I couldn't do in my life. And I carried that with me in
Mm.
every single thing that I've done in life.
That's really interesting, Jennifer, because a lot of people, I think it's almost like binary. You either make it or you don't when you get put down like that in solitary. Because some
Yeah.
people come back looking really different when they come back from solitary, and then some people, and I've had a lot of different people on the show that have been in solitary. One person was in for 10 years in solitary. The confidence that someone can gain knowing that I can do that. So if I can do that, I can do this and I can do that.
Mhm.
And it gives you a whole new sense of belief in yourself. And 3 weeks in solitary, that's a while to be just locked down.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I was so mad the first week, like, if I coulda everything is bolted to the ground and the wall, but if I
Yeah.
could have picked something up and, like, beat that door to death, I probably would have, because I was just, like, enraged, like, I hadn't
Hmm.
done anything to be in here, and so the feds show up after that first week, and there was an officer that was having a sexual relationship with an inmate there, and he was really having that relationship. And I ended up taking her job in veg prep, and her friends told the kitchen staff that I was having a relationship with him. So the feds show up and they're like, um, basically threatening me. If you don't admit to this and we find out you're lying, we are going to give you 5 more years on your sentence. And I was like, I don't
Hmm.
care what threat you put on the table. You can go through everything I have. I have not done that. I am innocent, and I'm not going to say that I did something that I did not. So
Hmm.
they come back after 3 weeks. We apologize. Sorry for the inconvenience, is what they said. You were telling the truth. We're going to let you back out to general population. Well, about a couple weeks later, they end up catching him putting money on the other girl's books from somewhere in Washington, the state of Washington, and he ends up getting fired.
Hmm.
Fired, not charged, just fired. And so it's just like, when you're in there, you are at the mercy
Yeah, for
of
sure.
whatever
You're
they
like
wanna
cattle,
do. Yeah, you are.
cattle with
You
a
are, and
number.
so
Hmm.
cattle with a number. I use that time to get to know me. I use that time to sit with myself. I used that time to unpack things that I had been carrying all my life. I'm coming up on my federal halfway house date. It's December 17th, 2009. The counselor calls me in. I think I'm getting ready to sign my halfway house papers. I'm excited. I'm going to be home for the holidays. She says, "Oh, we denied your halfway house time." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, you have strong ties to the community. You don't need that much halfway house time." I was like, "Strong ties? I have no ties to the community. I have burned every bridge. I know you see my file." "Well, you have parents. You'll be okay." So now I'm mad all over again because now here I am. I'm going to be in here for like another 45 days in this prison that I'm so ready to get out of. But in the midst of
Hmm.
that 45 days, the chaplain had put a call sheet out for a speaker that was coming in. So I sign up to go. I get down there, and in walks Katie Souza, the lady that wrote the book, The Captivity Series. And she
Hmm.
preached a sermon that was, to this day, maybe the best sermons I've ever heard. And at the end of it, she's got like kind of an altar call. Everybody's coming up. She's giving people messages. And she comes up to me and she said, "God spoke to me about you. You're going to get out. Your life is going to take off, and you will never be back here again. You have a prison ministry in you, and one day you will get your daughter back, and she will never forget a day that you lost with her." I get out a couple days later. I fly back to the federal halfway house, and 2 weeks later, I have an illegal cell phone in the halfway house that I'm not supposed to have, because back then they didn't let you have cell phones. We all have them hid in the ceiling tiles and
Hmm.
everywhere else. There was an ad in the Atlanta Journal Constitution for telemarketing. And I call on my legal cell phone. I do a phone interview. They want to bring me in for an in person interview. So now I have to go convince the halfway house director, Mr. Jones, to approve the move. And he's like, Miss Rogers, how did you get that interview? And I was like, I called from the payphone. He was like, yeah, right. He was like, but I'm going to approve this move. So I go to this interview. Now, mind you, I'm having to ride public transportation, the train, MARTA, the buses. I've never done that before. They don't have that where I'm from. So I am big city. I'm happy. I'm happy to be alive. There was nothing that you could have told me in that moment to take the smile off my face. So in I walked to this interview. I got my business suit on. I got my heels in my hand because I wore tennis shoes because it was a lot of
Mhm.
walking. I get in there. I know they're gonna hire me because I had made a decision that my life was about to start over, and I get in there and I'm in this interview, and it's going well, and this guy, he's in a suit and a tie, and I interrupt the interview. I said, "I just need to interrupt this interview because I wanna be honest with you about who I am." He was like, "Okay." And I said, "I just got out of a maximum security federal prison. I was a drug dealer and a drug addict, and I'm not that person anymore, and I'm gonna make somebody a lot of money." And I said nothing else. He's looking at me and his mouth is closed and it's like he don't know what to say. I definitely don't know what to say because 'cause I'm institutionalized. I just got out of a
Mhm.
maximum security federal prison. And so he
Right.
finally breaks the silence and he said, "Holy shit, I wasn't expecting that." And so we laugh and he was like, "Let me talk to the owner of the company. Call me tomorrow at this time." And they hired me. And I started on February 22nd, 2010, which is Madison's birthday. And 6 months later, I was on federal probation, traveling the country, opening up offices for that company, training people on how to sell over the phone.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. When you told me that earlier, we were on the phone, that you had success back early on with the whole telemarketing thing. So
Yeah.
now that you're doing this, what's going on in the rest of your world?
So initially, I was still in the halfway house.
Mhm.
So I'm just, riding the bus, riding the train, all that, going back and forth. So there wasn't a lot going on initially. And
Mhm.
once I got released from the halfway house, I'm living in Cartersville with my mom. And she had this car that she let me drive. It was this Mirage. It was the ugliest color, like teal fadish green that you could possibly imagine. And it had no air conditioning.
Okay.
I would get up in the morning and I would drive. So, just for reference for the people that are watching, from Cartersville to East Atlanta with no traffic, it's about an hour and 20 minutes. So, I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I would drive in before traffic. And by the time I would get off at 5 o'clock in the evening, it's burning up hot and there is traffic, and it would take me sometimes 2 hours to get home. So I've got all the windows down in this car and I am just sweltering. I'm like sweating my makeup off, sweating my hair out. By the time I get to like Cherokee County, Georgia, where the traffic opens up, and I've got about 35 minutes left to go, the wind is just blowing now, my soaking sweat hair. So by the time I get home, my hair is just, it's everywhere. I'm hot, I'm mad, and my mom cannot understand why I come home and I don't want to say anything. And she's also not understanding that I'm also institutionalized still. Like, I've not lived a normal life
Right.
ever.
Right.
And as an adult, and so I'm trying to regain my footing. I'm trying to figure out who I am. I've got all these thoughts and all these emotions I'm dealing with. I'm still going away somewhere in my mind sometimes, staring off, not having much to say in conversation. I don't want to sit in a restaurant. Once I'm done eating, I want the check and I want to leave. I don't want to just sit there. I'm programmed.
Mhm.
And she doesn't understand that. And she was like, "Why aren't you talking?" I was like, "I'm hot and I'm mad and I'm institutionalized and I'm having a heat stroke every day when I come home." And so the owner of the company ends up giving me the money to buy a car. He loans it to me, and I pay it back out
Yeah.
of my bonus check every month. And so
Yeah.
that solved that problem. And eventually, I ended up getting an apartment. I move out of my mom's house. I'm living in Atlanta. And I'm doing well. I'm traveling for for the company, and they're paying for everything, and, I'm winning these sales trips. My life was amazing, and I'm making at this point, I mean, 6 months out of federal prison, I was making $75,000 a year. By
Mhm.
this time, a couple years later, I'm well into 150,000,
Mhm.
and now I'm to a point where in that first year, actually, I was desperate to talk to Madison because they still were not letting me communicate with her. So I hire an attorney. They end up allowing her to come supervise to Georgia for 6 weeks. I ended up sending her home early because after about the first week, she hated me. She had been just poisoned against me in the worst way.
Mhm.
And so she ends
How old
up
would she
going
be
back.
now when this all happened?
At that point, she was 6.
Okay.
She was 6 years old, and I lost custody of her at 3.
Okay.
Um, and everything that I did at that point in my life was for the betterment of me, but also with the end goal of getting her back. I wanted her
Mhm.
back, and I knew that I was gonna fight for her at some point.
Mhm.
So, my life continues to get more and more successful. I end up an opportunity comes for me to fight custody for her. And I did not feel like I was ready in that time, but I'm a firm believer that when the door opens, you walk through it, and I had also asked for it. So I
Mhm.
walk through that door and I fight for her, and I spent every dollar that I had saved in my bank account fighting for custody of her, and I won. And at that
Wow.
point, she had been staying with me temporarily for 6 months. And when I came home and I told her, "The judge decided that you're gonna be staying here with me," I mean, she looked at me with the most disgusted look that she could fathom at that little young age, and she said, "I can't believe that my dad let this happen." And I went in my closet and I just had to cry because
Mhm.
that was not what I imagined the reunification of my family looking like. We
Mhm.
went to therapy, therapists quit on us, and I parented from guilt for the first year and a half. I was patient, I overgave, I overbought, I did all the things. And during that time, I was struggling financially because I was still paying back child support there, and I was having to pay to put her in camp while she was there for me, with that summer. And I didn't know at times how I was going to afford to feed her.
Mhm.
But I just held on to the fact that I believed that this was what was right for her based on some circumstances that were going on. And an opportunity presented itself for me to get the manager position of the Atlanta office. And I ended up getting that. In my first month commission check, I made $17,000 on top of my $100,000 salary at that point.
Mhm.
And through the difficulty of my relationship with her and how hard it was sometimes to go home to that environment, my work and my career became my outlet. And
Mhm.
so I made more money and I became more successful, and I stayed on that path and I stayed on that track. And eventually I stayed with that company for 8.5 years. Eventually I left there and I got into fintech, and same thing there. I hit the ground running, outsold the whole company, managed 2 teams on their leadership team, and I just knew that there was something more for me than that.
Mhm.
I knew that I was
Mhm.
called to prison reform. I knew that I had a heart for people coming out of incarceration. I knew that I had been on a path that maybe not even 1% of people will ever see coming out of
Mhm.
incarceration. And I wasn't ignorant to the fact that what I look like and what I sound like contributed to that.
Yeah,
And
and I think the
so
other thing, Jennifer, that plays into all that is that each and every step that you were taking was working, and you were getting better, and you were getting even more confidence, which might take us all the way back to that solitary confinement that you conquered that.
yeah,
But you walked into these
yeah,
places and you just led and you just performed and you just were doing better than everyone else. So yeah, you get to that point with the job and you're like, I've got another passion. How does this all like how do you wrap your mind around all of it?
You know, I was going into work every day. I'm managing these college educated kids that had never experienced 1 ounce of hard days that I had.
Mhm.
And I was
Mhm.
frustrated because I knew tons of people who were desperate to sit in that
Right.
seat,
Right.
but that company would not hire them. I was the exception.
Mhm.
And so I go home and I start brainstorming one week and I'm like, what is it that I'm passionate about? And it's women coming out of prison. What
Mhm.
is it that I'm good at? And it's selling over the phone. How can I marry these two things to create an opportunity for other women and women that I can help? I can help them get custody of their kids back. I can help them find housing. I can teach
Mhm.
them how to sell. Like, how can I do that? And so I came up with National Association of Women's Prison Reform. It was going to be a call center. We were going to do advertising. I developed this advertising product, but I knew I was going to need funding to do that. So I go to one of the founders of Cabbage. She's the one that actually hired me. She knew my story. And I tell her, I'm starting this company. Is there any advice? And she was like, my gosh, Jennifer, you don't need advice from me. You have been through more things in your life than I could ever even think of going through. But if there's anything that I could do to help, please let me know. Well, in the midst of my tenure at Cabbage, when I first started there, I left a $200,000 a year lifestyle at Benchcraft, which is what I was making there, to a no, $32,000 a year salary at Cabbage. I'm broke because my
Mhm.
lifestyle matches my previous career.
Mhm.
So I am blowing out of the water. I'm hitting my quota. And so I'm like, have y'all tried a cold call? And they're like, yeah, it doesn't work. And I'm like, let me try it. So they're like, well, you can try it, but it doesn't work. First person I get on the phone, he answers. I get him to qualify. He pulls the loan. They're like, how did you do that? I was like, this is all I've ever done. And so they come back to me with a challenge basically. And they're like, okay, we've got an opportunity. You guys still got to hit your quota. We're going to give you $500 for every lead that you call that you get to qualify. They don't have to pull the money. I was like, oh, say less. I think they ended up paying me $15,000 that month.
Mhm.
And then they took the deal back, but they built a cold call team and it failed.
Mhm.
And then they outsourced it and it failed.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
got to thinking about that. The only reason that y'all did that is because you believed that it would work and you believed that it would work because of me. So I go to
Mhm.
back to Catherine and I say all that. And before I can even ask her, she says, yes, we'll give you a contract. So they contracted my company. I'm hiring the women that they can't hire or won't hire. And
Mhm.
now I've got this call center of women coming out of incarceration, and we're calling for this fintech product and we're qualifying loans for them. And they knocked it out of the park. So
Wow.
now I'm bringing the advertising room. So now I've got this room running. I've got this room running. We've got a walk in bathtub contract. We have a voice over IP contract. And it's so much purpose, so much
Mhm.
passion, so much. I knew that this is what I was made to do. I'm speaking now inside of prisons. I'm working with the Department of Justice, speaking to, you know, disadvantaged youth and troubled kids. And we're set to make $1 million that year with how everything was going. And then
Mhm.
COVID happens and shut us completely down.
Mm.
And when that happened, it just took the wind out of my sails for a second because I
Yeah, it happened to a
knew,
lot of people.
man, I knew that I was called to this. I knew that this is what I was supposed to do, and we were on such a good run. And how is it that we've went this far and this is how it's just going to end? You know, Cabbage cuts our contract because they didn't secure funding for the year. And so now I began to brainstorm and I bring the company back as a national advertising company because I knew that was a good product, but it was only in Georgia. So because it's COVID and it's shut down, it's a real estate agent product. Realtors are at home. They're not out
Mhm.
working because the whole world's scared to death. So now they're
Right.
picking up their phones. We come back with 60 new contracts. I've got all these new hires. We start on a Wednesday, and Saturday, Madison wakes up at 16 years old, deathly ill, and she ends up having a ruptured brain aneurysm.
Mm.
So now here we are in Emory Neuro ICU. She's fighting for her life. And I have this company over here that I've just started back, and I I didn't have the heart to cut it out, to just stop it at that point because I didn't want to leave these women high and dry.
Mhm.
So the company is still running. One of my reps stood up and, took a step up, and she's kind of running the day to day in the office. I'm here with Madison. I'm watching her fight for her life. It does not look like she's going to live. And they come in there and they wake me up the first night that I finally went to sleep. It was the third night that we were in there, and they say she's showing signs of a stroke. Had she had a stroke, it would have killed her or she would have been a vegetable for the rest of her life. They rush her out. I go in that room, I slam the door, and I scream at God as loud as I could. Why are you doing this? I've had enough. Because at that point, our lives had been it was just too much. It was too
Mhm.
much. And at this point, like, you can't tell me that all of this that we've been through is going to come down to this final moment. And they bring her back in, and the signs of the stroke are gone. And she was normal for where we were in that moment. And I'm holding her hand, and she asked me, am I going to die?
Mm.
And I couldn't honestly tell her no. And of course, I lied and said no, but I didn't even believe the no myself because it looked like she was going to. And I went and I FaceTime my mom. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm crying. And I said, if she dies in this hospital bed before I ever got the chance to really know her, I will die with her. And my mom
Mhm.
was like, "You can't. You have another child you have to live for. You have got to get it together. You have to be strong for her." And up to that point, Brent, all we could see was each other's pain. Our
Mhm.
backs were always against each other. It didn't matter what we did, it didn't matter how far we'd come. We never could just be.
Mhm.
And in that moment, because the fracture was too deep of a wound, nobody could fix it. It had to be spiritual. When you're looking at death in the face, nothing else matters in that moment. And I put my guard down and I put my guilt down and I put my shame down and my anger. And she did the same thing. And for 6 weeks, I got to know my daughter in a way that some parents may never know their children. And after 6 weeks of watching her fight for her life and almost not making it over and over and over again, we walked out of that hospital and it was as if I had never spent a day without her.
Mm.
And so
Wow.
that word that was given to me from Katie Souza inside of federal prison, it took 11 years for that word to come to fruition, but it did. And we walked out of that hospital. And you would have thought that that would just be that's the end of this happy story, but it's not, because now I'm scared to death that I'm gonna walk in and find her dead in her bed. My son is 4, and he is terrorized because I just disappeared out of his life all of a sudden, and he had never been away from me more than 1 or 2 nights. So
Mhm.
now if I leave the room, he's having a screaming, crying meltdown because he thinks I'm just gonna he's not gonna see me again. And so we're going through all of these things, and it was just a lot, a lot, a lot. And I end up finding out that I'm pregnant again. And it was not the best timing, but I always wanted one more child and I always wanted one more son, and it was a
Mhm.
boy. And it gave me kind of something to be hopeful about and to take my attention off of all of these other things in the moment. And I ended up losing the baby at 13 weeks pregnant. And they gave me a medication to take at home to force my body to release the child. And I hemorrhaged
Mm.
from that and drove myself to the hospital. And I'm hemorrhaging blood. I just step out of the car, and it was as if somebody had took a 5-gallon bucket of blood and dumped it on the ground. They bring a wheelchair out. They whisk me in. They've got a mask on me because it's still COVID times. And when they put that mask on me, my blood pressure tanked and my heart rate skyrocketed. I'm throwing up on myself and I'm losing control of my bodily functions. And they thought they were going to have to give me a blood transfusion. And it was in that moment that I had to really like look at my life and ask myself, did I know me? If you stripped away prison reform, if you stripped away the accolades, if you stripped away my bank account, if you stripped away the properties and the cars and the nice things and the representative and all this that I had built for myself, if you took all of that away, did I know me? And the answer was no. I couldn't tell you what brought me joy outside of work, making money, my children. I couldn't tell you what my hobbies were. I couldn't tell you what made me happy. I didn't know me. And it was because I was still ashamed to look
Mhm.
at me. And I didn't, no matter what I had done back then and all the great things that I had done at this point, and I was doing prison reform and stuff inside of the women's prisons, and I was hosting these parties every year for their children. They hadn't seen their moms in years. I had done great work,
Mhm.
but I still didn't feel worthy of the life that I was living. And so it was in that moment that I decided to walk away from everything. I walked away from prison reform. I gave the women that still worked for me the ability to do that, what they were doing for me on their own. You can go and work.
Mhm.
You can just do it. Do it for yourself. This is how you set it up. This is how you run credit cards. This is how you do all this. And I went on a spiritual journey. And in that spiritual journey, I was searching. I needed to find me, but I also needed to find God because I still struggled. No matter the miracles that I had witnessed and experienced in my own personal life, I still didn't believe that I was good. And because I didn't believe that I was good, I struggled with, is God good? Because there were
Mhm.
still some things that I experienced in my life as a child that I should have never had to experience. And where was God at in those moments? And so I went in search of that. And I did these journeys and I meditated and I sat with myself again and I found out who I was. And I met God in the midst of that. And I sat in the presence of God and at 37 years old and I realized for the first time that no matter what I had done in my life, that I was a marvelous person. That all of that stuff that I went through it to become who I am today so that I can
Mhm.
sit in front of other people and say, it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter who you used to be. You can literally walk away from all of that and make a choice to
Mhm.
show up as something different. And through all of that, that is what I found.
That is really something, Jennifer. I mean, what a journey you've been on, because you've been in every different type of facet there is, from rock bottom to getting out, getting confidence back, business wise, leading, growth and all this, and getting your daughter back, getting the relationship, almost losing her. I mean, this is like a roller coaster ride of life, and then for you to finally say that you are comfortable with yourself, and
Mhm.
that all is kind of washed away from, you feel good about yourself, which is huge.
Yeah.
What do you think out of all of this is your biggest takeaway from this roller coaster ride journey?
For me, I believe that I came to this life and I chose to go through all of that and experience it so that I could one day wake up to enlightenment and who I really am, not just to heal me, but to facilitate other people to heal some things generationally in my family that have been passed down and down and down and down. And I just happened to be the person that was brave enough to go to hell and dig my way out of it
Mm.
so that I could be strong enough to sit on this podcast today and say, you know what? All of that ends with me. That
Mhm.
cup that I drank from as a child that was forced upon me, my children will never drink from that cup. And after I went through all of that, I went and got certified. And now I take people on spiritual journeys and a life, spiritual life coach, and I do one-on-one mentoring, and I've had people come to me from seeing me on podcasts in active addiction, and they give it up. They give it
Yeah.
up. They give up their addiction and they find themselves and they're on the path and they're on a path of purpose and finding them. And all it takes sometimes is to sit in front of somebody and know that if they did it, I can do it too. And
That
so
is
if
such a
it
big
took me,
deal.
it is. And if it took me going through all of that to give one person hope, for
Mhm.
one person to say, I've experienced some of the things that she's experienced. I may be experiencing them now, but I
Mhm.
know if she can do it, I can do it too. Because all it takes is a belief in yourself that no matter what it is that I've done, no matter where I'm trying to go, there is nothing that can stop me from getting there. Nothing.
Mhm.
It's you versus you. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Which
have
brings us to
reckless
your
faith
which brings us to
in
your
myself.
book,
Yes.
The You Within, which is a
Yes.
great title because it is the
Yeah,
you within. And if you believe the
it
you
is.
within, then hope and action can actually conquer just about anything that you can imagine, which I can see why, Jennifer, when you sit down with people, knowing that you've walked the walk and know all the angles that you've
Mhm.
been at, then somebody else can believe and have hope and then take action. And that's, the magic ingredients, I guess, to helping people is having
Yeah,
them believe in themselves again, but they have to believe that
yeah.
somebody else did it, which I think is just, it's an incredible story, an incredible journey. Um, Again, I want to say that the book is the You Within. I'm assuming you get that at Amazon, anywhere where you get your books.
Amazon.
The website is the You Within also, right?
So I do have the You Within website. I also
Okay.
have another website, which is fillyourcup.club.
For your cup. Dot what?
Fillyourcup.club.
Dot club.
Fillyourcup.club. Yep,
Okay. Great.
yep.
And I want to give a shout out to Homestead Financial. Lets me use this podcast room and all the fancy lights. If you've got home mortgage needs out there, Greg Aftiev is your guy. He knows all that stuff. When you're checking out the You Within, go ahead and get Nightmare Success, my book. They're both there. And if you got time, leave me a review on Apple. Those things are so great to read. And I love it when people do that. You want to check me out? Go to brentcassity.com. I spell it wrong. I spell it with a TY, not a DY. As I used to say to my people when I was writing my emails back from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Jennifer, Jennifer Rogers has a story, and it is a story that will stick with you for sure. It's one that just hits, and I appreciate you sharing it with us today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on, and, listen, if you're going through it, just keep going. Keep moving.
Keep going.
Keep
There's a country
moving
song to
forward.
that. If you're going through
Yes.
hell, keep on moving.
Just keep moving. Yes.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
darkness can outshine the light that you have within you. None.
I love it.
You just gotta
Such
have
great
reckless
advice.
faith in yourself. Yes. Have reckless faith in you. Because if you don't have reckless faith in you, who else is? No one.
That's right.
Yep.
Nightmare success in and out. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it.